This is a true story of my grandfather from around 1963. In the days of old, when the world was simpler and the air was cleaner, my great-grandfather lived in a remote village in Thailand where life was hard but fulfilling. He was a humble farmer, with his family being his only solace and support. The village was hidden in a beautiful jungle, where wildlife roamed freely and people believed in ghosts. One day, when the harvest season was over and the village was getting ready for the monsoon season, my great-grandfather received news that his beloved sister had passed away. She lived in another village that was a day's journey away, and he was expected to attend the funeral. Without any hesitation, he and a few other male family members started the long trek to attend her funeral. They carried with them food, water, and some traditional Thai funeral garb for the occasion. After 2 days of walking through the dense jungle and spending a night in the open, they arrived at the village early in the morning. As they entered the village, the dogs started barking ferociously and growling at them, sensing that they were strangers. The deceased sister's brothers came out to greet them and led them into the house where the body was laid out in traditional Thai funeral garb. As the family members gathered around, tears streaming down their faces, they didn't realize that they were about to witness something truly terrifying. Suddenly, my great-grandfather's heart skipped a beat as he noticed something strange happening. The dead sister's eyes flickered open, and a cold, lifeless stare fell upon them. The mourners froze, their grief turning into an icy fear that gripped them to their very core. The room fell silent as they stared at the open eyes, trying to comprehend what was happening before them. The air grew thick with a sense of foreboding, and the atmosphere became so heavy that it felt like it was crushing them. As they stood there in stunned silence, not knowing what to do, one of the elders found the courage to speak up. "You are already gone," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And we have come this far to pay our respects. Please do not embarrass us." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, nothing happened. But then, to their horror, the dead sister's eyes slowly began to move, following them as they shifted around the room. The mourners began to panic, their fear reaching a crescendo as the dead sister's eyes seemed to bore into their very souls. The elder continued, his voice shaking with fear, "We will leave, and nobody will be there to see you off." The words had barely left his lips when the dead sister's eyes closed with a finality that sent shivers down their spines. Everyone let out a collective sigh of relief as the oppressive atmosphere lifted, and they scrambled to get out of the room as quickly as possible. They knew that they had witnessed something truly sinister, and the memory of those open, lifeless eyes would haunt them for the rest of their days. The funeral procession marched on the following day to the small, eerie wooden house in the dead of night. My great-grandfather and his companions decided to stay with the family to offer their condolences, but they soon realized that they were not alone. As they drifted off to sleep, they were jolted awake by the unmistakable sound of tiny footsteps dancing on the creaky rooftop. The old house was made of sticks and thatch, and the thought of what could be lurking above was terrifying. Suddenly, one of the family members erupted in a rage, shouting at the ghostly presence. "You are already dead. How dare you embarrass us like this? If you do not stop, we will disown you." The house fell silent for a moment, but the relief was short-lived. Soon, a mournful, gut-wrenching cry pierced through the stillness of the night, coming from outside the wooden walls. Trembling with fear, they looked out to see a shadowy figure resembling a small child huddled in the corner, wailing in agony. They spent the whole night listening to the sound of the child's cries, and in the morning, they communicated with each other only through hand gestures. They were all too scared to speak out loud. One by one, they made excuses to leave, such as going to the bathroom, visiting someone, or fetching water, until they all finally left the house and started their journey back home. As they were walking through the jungle, my great-grandfather and his companions couldn't shake off the feeling that they were being followed. They heard strange noises in the bushes, and they could see shadows moving in the corner of their eyes. They quickened their pace, hoping to reach their village before nightfall. Just as they were about to cross a river, they heard a loud roar. They turned around and saw a tiger looking at them hungrily. They froze in terror, not knowing what to do. The tiger started moving towards them, and they could feel its hot breath on their faces. Suddenly, a group of villagers appeared out of nowhere and started shouting and throwing stones at the tiger. The tiger retreated, and my great-grandfather and his companions were safe. They continued walking, feeling grateful for the villagers' help. They reached their village just as the sun was setting. Exhausted and traumatized by their experience, my great-grandfather could not shake off the feeling that the events of the past few days had been more than just a coincidence. He felt that the spirits and the supernatural had played a role in their journey, and he was not sure if he would ever be the same again. When he arrived home, his family was relieved to see him safe and sound. They welcomed him with open arms, and he recounted the events of his journey to them. His family listened with bated breath, amazed by the story of the dead sister's eyes open and the child's cries outside the house. For weeks, my great-grandfather would hear strange noises outside his house and see shadows moving in the corners of his eyes. He began to believe that the spirits and ghosts had followed him home from the funeral and that they were trying to communicate with him. One night, as he lay in bed, he heard a soft whisper in his ear. He turned around and saw nothing but the darkness. But he knew that he was not alone. The whispering continued, and he realized that it was the voice of his dead sister. She was trying to tell him something, but he could not understand what it was. The whispering continued for several nights, and my great-grandfather began to lose sleep. He knew that he had to find a way to communicate with his sister and find out what she wanted from him. He consulted the village elder, who advised him to perform a traditional Thai ceremony to appease the spirits and communicate with them. My great-grandfather followed the elder's advice and performed the ceremony. He offered food and flowers to the spirits and chanted traditional Thai prayers. Suddenly, he felt a cold breeze blowing through the room, and he knew that the spirits had arrived. He asked his sister what she wanted, and she whispered in his ear. He could barely make out the words, but he understood that she was asking him to take care of her children, who had been left orphaned by her death. My great-grandfather was moved by his sister's request, and he promised to take care of her children as if they were his own. He went to his sister's village and brought the children back to his own village, where he raised them with his own family. The children grew up to be strong and healthy, and they never forgot the kindness of their uncle. Years later, when my great-grandfather was on his deathbed, he told his children and grandchildren the story of his journey to his sister's funeral and the events that followed. He told them that he had learned to believe in the supernatural and the spirits, and that he had found peace in knowing that he had fulfilled his sister's last wish. His family listened to his words with reverence, and they knew that they had inherited a legacy of kindness and compassion.